Now, if you're building a budget gaming PC in 2035, you might be using like something like this, the Ryzen 5600, which I think is a really good budget processor for under $80. You can also pair it with a GPU like this one, RX6600, which you can get for about $200. Now, really budget components, and let's see if these things are actually still viable in 2025. And we're going to run it on these games. And apart from that, to make things interesting, we're also going to see if going for the RTX 3060, which is a much more expensive card, makes a difference for a budget gamer. Considering the RTX 3060 is a little bit faster compared to the RX 6600. And for those who are new to the channel, these are our testing methodology. Okay, let's start with our first game. Warzone is quite good for our combo. We're getting about 130 average FPS with lows at around 90. Obviously, we are GPU and even the CPU's pushed to the limit here. However, it is okay. We can hit some shots. It's not bad at all. This is a pretty decent experience for our budget gaming setup. Apex Legends is not bad for our budget combo. You can see that we can push all the way up to 200 FPS if there's nothing going on. However, we're getting about 150, 160, 70, 170 FPS with this combo. Obviously, we are GPU bound on a DX11 API. This gameplay is pretty okay. It's not bad at all, even with the firing scenes. In Marvel Rivals, we're a bit struggling in this game, especially when we've got a lot of effects. Yeah, we're getting about 90 FPS in here, but when there's a whole lot of things going on, our FPS do drop really low and it can be a little bit stuttery. 100 watts on a GPU power, yeah, it's playable considering that we're on a budget setup, right? This is a budget setup, boys. Don't expect anything more. Moving on to a game that was just released late last year, Path of Exile 2. Now, this is a terrible experience. You can see that our processor is actually maxed out in here. You can see that like 96%, 98%, and this is where we would get those stuttering. We're not GPU bound on certain scenarios, and that's because the CPU is really pushed. I think we may need to upgrade our CPU or even lower the settings even more if we want to actually play this game, especially those critical boss fights. Okay, let's move on to our games which require a whole lot of FPS, and here we have Fortnite Performance Mode, which is quite okay for our RX 6600 Ryzen 5600 combo. However, one thing to note in here is that it seems like Radeon, AMD Radeon, is once again back to its old problem. The GPU clocks are dropping once again. Now you could tweak the RX 6600 on the Radeon settings, do these ones, and then it will slightly improve, as you can see from this comparison. Overall, Fortnite is okay for this combo considering that this is a budget combo. Another game which requires a whole lot of FPS is Valorant, and in here with our combo it's quite good. We're getting about 300 FPS, sometimes even 500 FPS, which is quite expected with our Zen 3 products. There are some stuttering in the first part of the game. However, this is normal for Radeon cards. Ultimately, as you go through like third or fourth round, this will stabilize. It's quite okay. It's quite good, right? It's okay. It's good. PUBG is a slower paced game, and we are getting, once again, decent FPS with this combo. There are some scenarios wherein we're pushed to our GPU, but we're getting about 150 FPS. The lows are pretty decent as well. Because it's a slower paced game, this type of frame rate is okay. It's quite fine. And I'm actually enjoying the game here. So if you're just playing PUBG, you can go with this setup and you'll be getting that FPS right there, 150 FPS with lows at 88. Pretty decent, pretty okay experience, especially for a budget gaming PC. Now in Helldivers, we've set this one in medium, and we have maxed out our graphics card in here. the FPS is a bit low. It's around like 60 plus on heavy action scenes. I mean, you could probably drop this down to low settings to actually boost that FPS. However, it's a PvE game. You know, it depends on you. You want better, like slightly better fidelity, you can go with medium. If you want to push that FPS, you can go low. Overall, I'm happy with this combo. Arena Breakout Infinite is actually not bad for this combo. I was expecting a stuttery experience, but in this case, it's actually quite good. Like it's passable, right? Now we can hit those shots there, right? We even got a couple of those guys there. There are some stuttering, which is normal for this game, and considering this is the biggest map and their rotation, we're in valley where there's a lot of vegetation, it's actually not bad. Right? We've got about 80 FPS, 70 FPS. It's a slower paced game, so it can be a bit forgiving, right? It's not that bad. Now, one game out of all these games that I really don't enjoy playing with this combo, and I'm not sure if this is with the game itself, currently with their latest season, is Delta Force. It's really bad, boys. Like, we're really like struggling in here. There's a lot of stutters, and I think this is with the game, the current state of the game. Now they may be fixing this one, but this one is just pretty bad. Look at those frame times, right? I struggle hitting my shots here because it was just all over the place, right? Yeah, the FPS do look good. However, I can tell you, gaming with this one is quite bad. Right? It's bad. Okay, now that we've seen the 1080p gameplay of this combo, let's see if it's worth investing more dollars and jumping into the RTX 3060 with the Ryzen 5600. Let's compare it in a bunch of games, and before we do that, hit that subscribe button if you're enjoying the content so far. Okay, let's go with the first game. In Warzone, you can see that both cards are performing roughly the same, and that's because we are CPU bottleneck in here. We've got about 75% utilization on our Ryzen 5600. Like, even if we're going through the running or the firing benchmark, they're very close to each other. It's probably around margin of error. So even if you invest extra money, the performance of the RX6600 is very similar to the RTX 3060. In Fortnite performance mode, you would see that the average FPS would go to the RTX 3060 against the stock RX6600 non-XT. However, the 1% lows always go to the AMD card. Now, when we swap it over to the tweak RX6600, you can see that it's slowly catching up to the RTX 3060. However, the RTX 3060 still lays an average FPS, although the 1% low, still remains with the RX6600. In Apex Legends, I was really expecting that the RTX 3060 would lead here. However, from what we have seen, it's actually still very similar. I mean, the RTX 3060 does have better stability in this heavy action scenario. However, for everything else, it's so like more or less the same for both cards. In static scenes, the RX6600 is actually better in terms of the lows. So there's that. In Path of Exile 2, both cards start roughly the same. However, as we go through this benchmark and it's much more stressful, the RTX 3060 does take a small lead over the RX 6600. It's very interesting to see as well that the RTX 3060 is not fully utilized, so we are obviously CPU bound again on both these scenarios. In Marvel Rivals, so we can see that the RTX 3060 is leading a little bit in average FPS. However, the RX 6600 is just doing fine, and this actually has the better lows compared to the RTX 3060. Overall, both of these cards for Marvel Rivals can be fine. We are both in a GPU bottleneck scenario, so yeah, but even with that in mind, the RX 6600 is still pretty close to the RTX
3060 12GB. In Helldivers 2, this is where we can see that the RTX 3060 is actually pulling in terms of performance. We've got 90 FPS on the RTX 3060, whereas with the RX6600, it's about only 80 FPS. Regardless if we're on the running benchmark or on a stratagem benchmark, the RTX 3060 takes the W in here. This is probably the game wherein we could see, a bigger lead in favor of the RTX 3060. Now, PUBG actually quite surprised me. I was expecting that the RTX 3060 would demolish the AMD card in this game. However, from what we've seen, the RX6600 is actually has the better lows in the running benchmark, although the average FPS still goes to the RTX 3060. However, when we go to the mortar benchmark, normally NVIDIA cards would dominate on this part of the test, but in this scenario, the RX 6600 is actually the better choice compared to the RTX 3060.
Well, the results for our test is really interesting. I would have expected that the RTX 3060 would actually push harder, but in reality, with our Ryzen 5600 and scenarios where we do get CPU bound, the results are more or less the same. I mean, there are games wherein this one may be a little bit faster compared to the other one, but overall they're really close. So on these things, I think if you're just considering value, the RX 6600 is actually not a bad choice. And yeah, if you're just pairing it with the Ryzen 5600, I think you could save those extra dollars and buy something else with it money. And while we're talking about those things, if you're considering maybe the RTX 3050, right? Something that's a bit closer to the RX 6600, we also did a video of that one right here. So if you're interested in that, click this video right here, and I'll see you guys over there.